The Ursa Minor Fighter flight stick from WinWing already offers a huge amount of features for a fairly affordable price. But for players who want to enhance their experience, may I offer a suggestion? Warning, what you're about to see was performed by professionals or under the supervision of professionals. Do not attempt to recreate or reenact at home. You will have a broken joystick. This is the WinWing Ursa Minor Space.
Return free contact.
That's fine, that's not the hole we want. Uh-oh. That may have been a poor decision.
Yo, Dave! Okay, these nuts! The Ursa Minor Space is part of WinWing's HOSAS, or Hands-On Stick and Stick Pack, providing a sideways tilt to the flight stick, giving it a more throttle-like orientation. It has Hall effect, pitch, and roll axes, a lockable twist axis, a potentiometer slider axis, and a potentiometer thumbstick with center click. It also has a 5-way sensor select hat, 5-way trim hat, 5-way countermeasure hat, and a 5-way index finger hat on the side. It also has 3 single push buttons found on the head of the grip, and a 4th single push button for the pinky. There is also a 2-stage primary trigger, as well as a 2-direction secondary trigger, and on the base you will find a total of 14 single push buttons, with 7 on the left side of the stick and another 7 mirrored on the right side of the stick, giving you a total of 43 buttons and 6 axes, which is crazy at this price point. And not to mention, you can get this for even cheaper during WinWing's Black Friday sale. Now, of course, all this hinges on one thing. Is the Ursa Minor Space even a good throttle? I mean, after all, a throttle that springs back to center isn't exactly a good throttle. Well, that's where the underside of this comes in. Removing the base plate cover reveals 2 springs, one for pitch and the other for roll. By removing the spring for pitch, you will now have a throttle that no longer springs back to center. Now, as you can see, it's not exactly helpful if the throttle can't hold the position you left it in. That is where the dampeners come in. By tightening these 2 screws evenly, you can increase the dampening on the pitch axis so much that it will actually hold the position you left it in. And just like that, you've got yourself a throttle. Albeit a very short throw throttle, because this thing doesn't exactly move very much, so that brings it to question, how good is it really? Like, in practice, is it actually a good throttle? Well, that's what we're going to find out next in a series of throttle-focused testing.
Now, one thing I did forget to mention is that these Ursa Minor sticks, or throttles, or HOSAS, they actually come with haptic feedback built into them. So if you do anything like shoot the guns, pull too many G's, or like in this case, I'll pull the speed brake, you can actually feel the sticks rumbling in your hands as you perform those actions. And once you stop doing those actions, they will stop rumbling. So it's a nice bit of extra feedback that you're getting from your aircraft that you otherwise wouldn't get from most other sticks and throttles. Now, with the nature of being HOSAS, there is a kind of a, technically a limiting factor when it comes to this throttle, in that there is a very limited 30-degree throw range in the forward and aft direction of this stick, or throttle, compared to most. And a lot of people would consider that a limiting factor. So what I want to do is really push the limits of being able to control my position relative to this tanker in something like air-to-air refueling. But knowing me, I'm going to do this just a little bit different to push the limits. So in today's case, what we're actually going to do is preemptively insert our probe into the basket and have it reel out when it's already ready to go. I don't think I've ever done this before, so I'm very curious how this actually turns out. We'll get into position here. We just need to put the probe in whatever spot the basket comes out of. And once we're ready, we'll tell them to ready pre-contact.
Ready pre-contact. Clear to contact.
Oh no, it didn't work! Why didn't it work? No! I didn't expect it to just phase through. What the heck? I thought it was tangible all the way in. Huh. I guess there's a point where it just no longer interacts with your aircraft.
Contact. You're taking fuel.
Weird. Okay, let's see how far we can put it back in. This is mostly a test of the pitch and roll controllability. Because my position relative to the tanker forward and aft is actually pretty easy to handle based on how this feels right now. Uh-oh.
Contact.
A little bit
You're
low.
taking fuel.
Just a bit closer. Wonder what the limit is here. Oh, we're drifting out of it. No! Dang it! No, I wonder. There's like a little hole on the tail section of the tanker. I wonder if I can collide with that? Like, what happens if I try to stick the probe into that bit there?
Return pre-contact.
That's fine, that's not the hole we want. We want this one. Oh, almost had it. Ah, come on, really? This whole section is intangible? Really? Oh, you know what it probably is? It's probably the probe that's intangible now that I think about it. Because if that were to contact a basket and then cause all sorts of like collision issues, then you would have a whole lot more problems, especially in a multiplayer environment. Oh well. Well, I think that was a good enough test. If that wasn't good enough showing of the kind of throttle control you can get out of this thing, then I don't know what is. So I think that was a good enough test. Anyways, let's move on to the next test. So for this next test, I was thinking I can hop in the AH-64D Apache and kind of just toss it around, fly it through trees, between buildings, apparently under bridges that I'm not even sure if I can clear. Oh my goodness, that was close. But yeah, so I wanted to show that despite the limited 30-degree throw range of the Ursa Minor Space, you can still get a lot out of it even in something like the AH-64D Apache. Now just keep in mind, this is a heavy attack helicopter, so you can't really just like throw it around, do a 360 on a dime or anything like that. You have to be deliberate, you have to be methodical, you have to plan out where you want to go and execute. But at the same time, it's still a lot of fun to just throw around and fly between buildings, at least buildings that could actually fit between. I thought this would be a nice little showcase of exactly that. Alrighty, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get this sucker into a hover and show just how capable it is at holding a specific altitude. And just like that, we could go hands off after engaging the attitude and altitude hold. So we are now completely hands off. Uh-oh. That may have been a poor decision. Oh, jeez. Oh, no. Okay, so I'm pretty sure I know exactly what happened there. So if you notice, we are currently in altitude hold, as you can see based on our IHATS display. And right now we are holding a radar altimeter of 20 feet. But if you notice, we are currently above a building. So if we were to drift ever so slightly to the right, over the grass off to the side, you'll notice you will suddenly, quote unquote, bump up to about 30 feet. Oh, 40 feet. And now the aircraft wants to drop back down because I told it to hold 20 feet. So as you can see, the Apache has dropped down to the 20 feet that we told it to be at, but now it's relative to the ground position as opposed to the roof position. So it's doing exactly what we told it to do, it's just pilot error that caused us to slap our rotor blades on top of a very tall apartment building. Now, that being said, I did notice something that I wanted to bring up that's actually kind of cool, and it's actually in the front seat. So, if you notice, the TDAC has two grips on the right and left side of the center screen. And wouldn't you know it, the Ursa Minor fighter actually kind of looks exactly like it. Well, not exactly like it. Okay, I'm gonna try to get this in frame so you can see it more easily. Okay, I think this is good enough. So while this isn't a one-to-one obviously it's not a one-to-one recreation of the TDAC grip, but if you notice, on the Ursa Minor fighter, you do have two 5-way hats, an analog thumbstick, two push buttons here on the right, and then another couple 5-way hats for the index finger and for the thumb. And here on the TDAC grip, you have the two 4-way hats, the thumbstick slew, and then you have a bunch of 3-position switches that you can bind to the other 5-way hats, as well as the two push buttons on the right for C-scope and slave. So, it's not an exact one-to-one replica, but you can fit basically all the important stuff on the Ursa Minor fighter, and not to mention, this thing even has a dual-stage trigger just like you would have on the TDAC for firing the laser or firing the weapons. This is actually a really good option if your goal is to recreate the front seat of the Apache. Short of 3D printing and assembling your own true replica of the TDAC. This is still a really great alternative to something like that, so I thought that was pretty cool. Now with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and move on to the next section where we do a Case 1 carrier landing in the F-14 Tomcat.
So in my opinion, nothing feels more satisfying than snagging that 3-wire after a long, successful mission. But at the same time, nothing feels worse than boltering and having to go back around. So with this, we're testing to see if this WinWing HOSAS has what it takes to keep up with the demands of not just any Case 1 carrier landing, but a Case 1 carrier landing in the F-14 Tomcats, a non-fly-by-wire Cold War era fighter jet. So our goal is to put the carrier under our left wing and use this opportunity and make sure the deck is clear. It looks pretty good. So now our goal is to make sure we maintain 800 feet and 350 knots. It looks like we're a little slow and a little high. Oh, and we're already 1 mile ahead, so let's go ahead and enter the brake with speed brake out, level turn, maintain 800 feet. And as we slow down and approach 250 knots, that's when we'll drop gear and drop flaps. We'll also start trimming nose up for on-speed AOA. And let's also deploy our DLC, our direct lift control surfaces. And now we will start leveling out so we don't end up too close to the boat as we enter the downwind, and continue trimming for on-speed AOA. Alright, that's looking pretty good. So our goal now is to maintain 600 feet while downwind of the carrier, and to continue adjusting our trim for on-speed AOA, because that's constantly fluctuating as we adjust the throttle. So surprisingly, we actually managed to get on-speed AOA in 600 feet pretty quickly, so now we don't have much to worry about other than to make sure we turn at just the right time once we see the round down. And there it is. Coordinated turn with a little bit of left rudder into the turn. And as we turn for base, our goal is to hit 400, at least in the case of the Tomcat, I didn't realize this, but apparently our goal is to hit 450 feet once we hit the 90. What I'm normally used to is the Hornet, and I'm pretty sure the number there at the 90 is 500 feet. Okay, and we're at the 90. We're not hearing the radar altimeter, which means it's a little late. Oh, and there it is. We were a little late with that 450 feet, but maybe we can make up for it as we enter the groove. And as we enter the groove, we will go... Oh, and we're kind of low. Wow. Okay, let's correct that just a wee bit as we call the ball here.
101, Tomcat ball, 6.1. Roger ball.
Ooh, that sounds like Dave. Oh, and no feedback from Dave, so this is actually looking pretty good for a potential OK 3-wire. Just gonna try to fly that meatball, looking pretty good. Yo, Dave! Okay, these nuts! Oh, worth it. The EGIW means I didn't throttle up, which I didn't because I was too busy flipping off Dave, so whatever, worth it. And with that, let's go ahead and wrap things up with my final thoughts. So, what do I think about the Ursa Minor Space as an alternate throttle option? So overall, I think it's actually a pretty decent throttle, like it will get the job done. But the limited 30-degree throw range is certainly a factor to consider. And while all my tests showed exactly what's possible despite the short throw range, you also need to keep in mind I am someone who has a lot of experience in DCS already. I can do this stuff because I've done it for a long time now. So while it's possible, there is a distinct lack of forgiveness compared to a more traditional throttle with a longer throw. Also, if you're in the market for a TDAC controller for the CPG seat in the Apache, but don't want to 3D print and assemble one yourself, well, it turns out the Ursa Minor HOSAS set can actually fill that role fairly well. Now, I do realize that not everyone is in the market for a HOSAS or hands-on stick and stick, or even a HOTAS, a hands-on throttle and stick. So perhaps you're only really interested in the stick part of this. Well, if that's the case, feel free to check out my review of the WinWing Ursa Minor Fighter, the flight stick that pairs well with the Ursa Minor Space. And with that out of the way, thank you for watching and have a nice day.